Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Paul Ryan.
Everybody.
So how are you doing today, Mr. Speaker?
That's the music I grew up on.
Nice. I wasn't sure what it was, but...
AC/DC.
Yeah.
Okay, we just dated each other.
I'll take your word for it. Mr. Speaker, great to see you, and I'm even more glad to see that your beard is gone. I think...
Yeah, boo, boo. Who's pro-beard? Yeah, all right.
I don't know. I mean, you may run the party of Lincoln or be pretty high up, but you can't do the beard of Lincoln, I think. I mean, you've
I'm
got...
a bow hunter. It's what we do in deer season.
All right.
It's what I do.
All right, we'll give it to you. So, I wanted to lighten things up a little bit because we are going to talk about a pretty heavy and serious topic today. And it is about how do we win the war on poverty? How do we expand opportunity for everybody? And you've been working on this issue intensely for the past 3 years. You're a pretty low-key guy, hiding behind the beard and all that. So a lot of people haven't heard about what you've been doing in terms of fighting poverty and reaching out to communities who have been hit and blighted by poverty. So to start things off, we have a little segment here that we're going to show and talk about in terms of what you've been doing.
Great.
On the front line of the war.
That's why you got to have people who remind those in this trap that it's not permanent and that you have the ability to get out.
Nothing is more powerful or credible than a witness.
This transformation thing went on, I didn't care about the outside. I didn't care what I saw in the mirror.
I still believe that we have the capacity within our own nation to heal ourselves.
But you have to have solutions that work.
The hood heroes are the heroes.
And the movement has to do with people.
I love you.
I love you too, man.
What do you think is the answer to poverty? Well, let me show you what I saw.
Well, thank you. So, and that clip is from OpportunityLives.com, where myself and my team, our leader, John Hart, he was a former comms director for Tom Coburn, who we all know and love. So we've been working with you, Speaker, to tell these stories at OpportunityLives.com. And basically, tell us what you've done the last 3 years.
Yeah, so that's a good picture of some incredible human beings, good friends of mine now, who are actually succeeding in defeating poverty. I mean, what we don't all see in this country is that right under our noses, in the most difficult communities in America, there are men and women who are successfully overcoming poverty themselves and helping other people to do the same. And so what we're trying to do is learn from them, and so that we see more of that. And as conservatives, I think we have so much to offer in this area. As conservatives, I think we can get the moral high ground. And the goal here is to go at the root causes of poverty, to help break the cycle of poverty, and to call into question the status quo of this war on poverty, which has basically been 50 years, trillions spent, and we basically have a stalemate on our hands. And we think by applying our principles, we can see better results and actually get at the root causes of poverty. And the comeback video just shows you what our principles look like in real life.
Yeah, no, I want to pick on what you said, which was that conservatives traditionally have been back on our heels. We've been pushed back by liberals to say that we don't care about the poor, that we don't care about people who have been left behind. But that couldn't be more far from the truth, as you know. And tell us why that is. Why does government actually exacerbate the problem of poverty rather than trying to solve it or cure it?
Two things. I think we've lost the definition of success in the war on words, I guess. We have been defining success as how much money are we spending, how many government programs have we created, how many people are on those programs. That's success. Well, why don't we think about measuring poverty as success in the war on poverty by how many people are we getting out of poverty? How many people are getting on their own 2 feet and living lives of their own, shaping their own destiny, reaching their version of the American dream? So that's point number one. Point number two is what we are doing is we are saying the government in so many ways has been a part of the problem. I call it the poverty trap. If you take all these government programs, I'm just talking about the federal government, about 92 federal programs, spending $800 billion a year, and they're all stacked up on top of each other, and what they effectively end up doing is they tell people don't work. They make it harder for a person to work. The top effective tax rate in America today is not being paid by Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers probably deserves that tax rate. It's paid by, the single mom with 2 kids making $20-something thousand, that if she gets a raise, she'll lose 80 cents on the dollar, so she doesn't. Or if she goes to work, she loses more benefits than she gains in going to work. And so we're trapping people in poverty by basically paying people not to work. And so we need to make it so that work always pays. And what we're doing with these programs is we're isolating the poor. We're pushing people outside of the workforce, and they're missing out, and we're missing out on their talents. And so we think good conservative welfare reform, moving people from welfare to work, going with what works, and letting local communities have more power to revive their communities like these guys do in these great videos.
So you're saying the federal government doesn't know what it's doing and local communities do?
They do. Not only does the federal government not know what it's doing, the federal government thinks it knows what it's doing, and then when it does it, it actually does more harm than good in many cases. No, I'm not saying...
Right. You're absolutely right.
I'm not saying everything is bad, and the federal government can provide resources, but the federal government should mind the supply lines, not the front lines. And this is what the left misunderstands so profoundly, I think. There's this space between ourselves and our government. It's called civil society. It is community. It's where we live our lives. And what the left always seems to confuse is they think this is wrong, bad, inefficient. More government should be closer between ourselves and our government. There should not be this middle ground. Our churches, our civic groups, our communities, our families. That's where we live our lives. That's what Alexis de Tocqueville came to America to say how great we were and how exceptional we were. The left is squeezing this. We want to expand this. And we believe by getting the government out of the way and removing these barriers that allow people to make something of their lives, we can do a better job of actually fighting poverty, and we'll measure success on outcomes, on results. Are people actually getting out of poverty and building their own lives together?
Right. So you're talking about accountability from your government. What a novel idea, right?
We want to actually measure success by real success.
Right, right. Well, and talk a little bit about regulation as well, in addition to this poverty trap, because regulation, and this is something that we as conservatives, we really need to push back about this. Regulation hurts the little guy. It hurts people who need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. This is something, for example, Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank is killing banks that are owned by African Americans. They cannot comply with this regulation. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Talk about regulation and the role that plays in...
I call it the 2 R's. Regulations are regressive. Regulations raise the cost of government, regulations raise the cost of living, regulations raise the cost of everything and make it more difficult for people who are in poverty to get out of poverty. Regulation raises the price of your food, it raises the price of your clothing, it raises the price of your energy, of your electricity. Regulation makes it harder to create jobs. Regulation, and this is why one of the 5 planks of our agenda that we're putting out in the House of Representatives is regulatory reform, but more importantly, and it goes to self-government. Who writes the laws in our country? Is it the legislative branch of government under Article 1 of the Constitution, who are duly elected by their elected by the people, or is it this 4th branch of government that nobody voted for, career bureaucrats, they don't know you, you don't know them, who are writing all these regulations that actually end up having the full force of law? Take a look at the new coal regulation coming out of the Obama administration that the Supreme Court struck down. 65% of our power in Wisconsin comes from coal. They were going to jack up our electricity rates. And, it's kind of cold in Wisconsin, just so you know, this time of year especially.
Hence the beard.
So they're going to, hence the beard. Actually, there is something to that. What they were going to do is crank up the cost of electricity. Who does that help the most? Who does that hurt the most? It hurts people who live paycheck to paycheck, who need to feed, who need to put gas in their car or heat their homes. And it hurts businesses and manufacturers who want to hire people. So what we're going to be offering and running on this fall is all these major regulations that are coming out of these unelected bureaucracies, all that has got to come back to Congress for a final vote and approval or amendment before it goes into effect, so we restore the Constitution and the principle of self-government.
Excellent. No, I think that that's very interesting when you're talking about regulation as the barrier and as putting layers of bureaucracy between the vulnerable and those who are supposed to be protecting them. And what kills me though is that you could talk about these facts. These are facts. These are quantitative data pieces. We've got them. We've got the Heritage Foundation does great work. American Enterprise Institute. I mean, amazing think tanks. You could spout facts all day, and yet the liberals are the ones who still kill us when it comes to poverty.
Yeah,
how do we push back against that?
And one of the things we're saying is, we have these things called cost-benefit analysis, which the Obama administration ignores, that we want to store to weigh the costs and the benefits of regulations. But now we're saying, let's also measure how proposed regulations affect the poor, how proposed regulations affect the out-of-pocket costs, the take-home pay of people, how they affect jobs. We need to think of this as well and measure this. And there's, by the way, a way to measure this so that public officials and that the public see what are these harmful regulations going to do to the least among us, to the people living paycheck to paycheck, to people trying to build their lives together. The point I would make in all of this is, let's go at the root cause of poverty to break the cycle of poverty. And just so you know, government isn't the answer. Government can be a part of the answer by helping people be the solution, getting government out of the way, and government can provide resources in many ways. But let's customize welfare benefits so that they can meet people with their needs and encourage things like work, encourage things like going to school. We have tens of millions of able-bodied adults in America who aren't working, who aren't looking for a job, or aren't even in school getting training for a job. This is a big problem for America. And as conservatives, we reformed welfare in 1996. That was one program. It worked really well, by the way. Work requirements, time limits.
It lifted millions of people out of poverty.
It lifted millions of people out of poverty. It dropped child poverty rates precipitously.
Right.
But that was one program. We have several dozen others that have not been reformed, and that's what we want to do.
Right, and that's fantastic. And in terms of your, as we said, you've been doing this for 3 years now. Talk a little bit more about the people element of this. So you've been going to rural areas. I went to high school down in the Ozarks. You've got poverty there in Appalachia, also in our urban areas. Talk about your tour, because you've been going around with Bob Woodson. He is a hero in the war on poverty.
He is.
Tell us about the people side of
Bob's
what you've
my
seen.
mentor. Bob is a person who runs the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, taking conservative principles and apply it to the problem of poverty to show better solutions. So I've been spending the last few years going around America, visiting with poor communities and with leaders on the front lines of the war on poverty. You saw Jubal Garcia, the first guy talking in that video. Jubal Garcia runs a ministry called Outcry in the Barrio out of San Antonio. They're taking people who are addicted to heroin off the streets, putting them in their place, in their program, and for months they're working with people to get them off heroin, rebuild their lives. They're finding Christ, and it's working. They're not going back on the streets. They're not going back in drugs. This is something that is civil society that is actually working to help these people rebuild their lives. One other thing, Omar Jawar, the other guy, the second guy talking. Omar is an incredible guy. Omar and his best friend, Anton Lucky, one guy ran the Crips, one guy ran the Bloods in Dallas. These guys were tough people. These guys went to prison. They were gang leaders. What are they doing now? They found God. Not everyone's faith-based, I grant you, but these two are really special ones, and they have credibility. So what are they doing in the streets of Dallas? They're ministering to young men, and they're saying, do not make the mistake that I made. Do not do this, because this is what will happen to your life. They have credibility, and they are able to turn young men and get them on their path, get them out of gangs, get them out of violence, and get them into being good husbands and good fathers and gainfully employed. These men are heroes. These people have cracked the code. How do you break the cycle of poverty? That's not government. That's civil society. That's people helping each other, fighting poverty eye to eye, soul to soul. That works, and that's what we're trying to show, and that's what we want government not to hurt, not to block, not to push aside, but we want more of that, and that is what we're trying to talk about.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm reminded, maybe some folks in this room didn't know, but we co-hosted with Opportunity Lives and the American Enterprise Institute and the Kemp Forum. We hosted a presidential forum on poverty earlier this year in January, and we had half a dozen presidential candidates. And one thing that Mike Huckabee said that really struck when you said what you just did was that the government can give you a sandwich, but the government cannot give you a hug.
That's right.
Government is inherently a bureaucratic, sanitized sprawling institution. It's not a human, it's not a heart-to-heart institution. And I think the work that you are doing here is showing that we are, as conservatives, we care about the full person and not just a blank check.
We care about restoring the American idea, and that is the condition of your birth does not determine the outcome of your life. We are the only country founded on an idea. That's the idea. That's what it's all about.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been great to chat with you here, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Carrie. God bless
All right.
everybody. Have a great day.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Oh, yeah.